bringing together, I think, two great initiatives, mindfulness and philanthropy. So what's the relationship between mindfulness and philanthropy? Well, I'll start off with, I suppose, looking at it conceptually, but I'll also try and look at it from both an experiential point of view, but also what's the science got to say? Are there any actual links between the two? Now, philanthropy. Philanthropy comes from two words, philo, to love. So philosophy is the love of wisdom, philanthropy, to love, and anthropos, mankind or humankind. So philanthropy is the love of humankind. That's a very nice thought. And what follows on from that, I suppose the more common use of the word philanthropy, and if you looked at the dictionary, practical benevolence. What naturally flows from a love of our fellow human beings is a desire to be helpful or useful to those particularly who are in need. So mindfulness and philanthropy, I'm going to put a few suggestions to you. We do not feel love, compassion or empathy for our fellow human beings without paying attention. The more we wake up and the more that we, the more caring we will be for our fellow human beings and the planet, but that's a whole different subject. But I think that actually waking up, the more we wake up, the more it is a very natural thing to care for our fellow human beings. Mindfulness is both a form of meditation and it's a way of life. To just characterise it as a form of meditation possibly limits it to thinking, oh, well, that's mindfulness and then there's life in general. Mindfulness is a training for life. One practices mindfulness meditation so that one can get out of the chair and hopefully be a little bit more mindful a little bit more of the time. So it's more than a meditation practice. Meditation, all meditation practices, if you like, you could say, well, they're all mental disciplines. It's the mind that learns how to meditate, and they certainly involve training attention, but they do vary according to what the goal of the meditation practice is and what the particular focus is. In mindfulness, using the senses, using the body is a very good starting point because the body is always in the present moment. Now, has anybody in here got the kind of mind that is hardly ever in the present moment? Have you got one of those? Right. Well, you're in the present moment enough to actually put up your hand to actually realise I asked a question about that. But you those people who put up your hand before love wine? Okay, if you love wine and you go to a wine tasting and you have that wine, you hear it as it's being poured into the glass and then you swirl it around, you look at the colour, you smell that wine, you taste it. You don't just taste it, you feel that wine, you savour the aftertaste. You are practicing a form of mindfulness meditation. If you stop after a few glasses, you are still practicing mindfulness meditation. If you're on to your second bottle, you're not practicing mindfulness meditation. But any time we're paying attention, connected to the senses, we're in a sense, the mind's present as well. So what we're going to do is not practice tuning out or going off somewhere else, is we're going to practice tuning in for a few minutes to the present moment using the body. Because the mind has a tendency to wander. You might have noticed that. You're interested in mindfulness, you buy a book from the bookstore on mindfulness, you go home, you open it up, you're halfway through the first chapter and you haven't taken in a word of what you're reading. And all of a sudden you realise, oh, I'm not paying attention. You go back to the start, you're about halfway through the first paragraph again, and your mind goes off again, and we're on automatic pilot, reading, turning the pages, but we're not taking in anything of what we're reading. This is unmindfulness. Drive from point A to point B, don't remember anything of the journey. We just kind of assume that we drove the car because we got out of the driver's seat at the end of the journey, but we have no conscious proof of that fact because we didn't remember much of the journey. These are examples of unmindfulness, automatic pilot. This is a study from the Harvard Business Review, and they're looking at the modern workplace, and they coined the term attention deficit trade, the hyperkinetic, time-pressured work environment, and it is associated with shorter attention spans. There's a number of other things associated with it as well. Black and white thinking. So time-pressured decision-making. It's this or it's this. Quick, jump to a conclusion. Without any consideration of the subtleties, complexities, shades of grey. Difficulty staying organised, setting priorities and managing time, and a constant low level of panic and guilt. That's the common workplace increasingly in today's world. Anybody recognise any of that at all? Clifford Nass is one of the researchers who's done a lot of work with multitasking. Kids, particularly kids who are multitasking, not just doing two things at once, but lots of things at once. Look at how well those kids function. These are kids doing 5, 6 or more things at once all the time. It turns out multitaskers are terrible at every aspect of multitasking. They get distracted constantly. Their memory is very disorganised. Recent work we've done suggests that they're worse at analytical reasoning. We worry that it may be we're creating people who may not be able to think well and clearly. In many ways, the IT, which is such a wonderful servant, I suppose, is becoming a bit of a master in some ways and can become quite a tyrannical master. So what do we understand about multitasking? Well, multitasking is a bit of a misnomer because the human brain does not pay attention to two things at once. What we do is we attention switch. When we're trying to do two things at once, we attention switch. And we do it so fast it becomes a blur, creating an impression and paying attention to two things at once. But what we're actually doing is processing the information very poorly because we're actually getting a sound grab there, a little bit of information there, and we're going back and forth and trying to stitch it together. For example, talking on a mobile phone and driving a car is an example of complex multitasking, doing two complex things at once. How much does that increase the risk of a motor vehicle accident? Any guesses? Sorry? It's about 410%. Texting while driving? Texting while driving a jumbo jet. This guy actually, the pilot, was texting while he was flying an international flight. He just happened to forget to put the wheels down when he was coming into land and managed to pull out in time. 23 times more likely to have a car accident while texting. So anyway, we think we can do two things at once, and we can, but we just can't do them anywhere near as well as we think we can. Activating this stress response all the time is associated with a whole lot of changes that are not actually very good for our mental health and well-being. It's not only an issue for depression and anxiety, but also it impairs our immunity, so we get more coughs, colds and sicknesses, increases atherosclerosis, so the process that leads to heart attacks and strokes, metabolic syndrome, blood pressure, blood glucose, blood lipids, bone demineralisation, osteoporosis. If we wanted to accelerate ageing, this is how we do it, all right? Also of the brain. The areas of the brain that we rely on for high performance, for decision making, for processing information, for functioning in a complex world, particularly involve the hippocampus, which is the learning and memory centre of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex. Those areas of the brain age fast. We lose cells that don't function well. There's only one bit of the brain that grows, and that's called the amygdala, which is the fear and anxiety centre of the brain. It's activated more of the time. It literally gets anatomically bigger and more reactive. Mindfulness in the brain. There are just lots of studies. These are just a few of them. It slows the rate of brain ageing. These are some brain scans over there. Just the grey matter literally thickens up. Instead of losing cells at a rapid rate, we start to put new cells on in the brain, which is fascinating. We didn't know the brain could do that about 10, 15 years ago. It also improves functioning in areas related to executive functioning, so understanding and working in a complex world, attention control, self-regulation, sensory processing, memory and regulation of the stress response. It quietens down that fear and anxiety centre of the brain as well. Emotional intelligence is, it's another one of these very hot and important topics in psychology. Mind you, it's not necessarily really new. These are the 5 hallmarks, if you like, of emotional intelligence. So more self-aware. It's not just the external environment, it's our own internal environment. Reactivity, judgments, fears, doubts. So it's actually being more aware of our own internal landscape as well. Self-regulation, able to deal with those difficult emotions and reactions better. A deeper level of motivation, not motivated by the superficial things in life, but a much deeper level of motivation and real commitment to the things that one really values. Empathy, more empathy again, and better social skills. And it's interesting, Ruth Bay has done a lot of the work here, and this is just one of the studies that looked, is there a relationship between emotional intelligence and mindfulness? And it seems that there is. More mindfulness, more emotional intelligence, okay, which is a very interesting thing. More mindfulness, less neuroticism, psychological symptoms and experiential avoidance. More able to turn towards and confront the issue rather than avoid and run from it. So what we're going to do is very consciously pay attention, but we're not going to put any pressure on ourselves to get it right, all right? So like a medical student learns mindfulness, I've got to get a high distinction for mindfulness practice. No pressure to get it right, we're just going to practice paying attention in a non-judgmental way for a few minutes. I'm going to practice the same thing, so I'll be sitting down the front as well. So if you want to practice with me, then please do, and if not, just sit quietly and listen so you know when we are practicing. And if you do sit quietly and listen, you are practicing mindfulness anyway. So, all right. So it helps if the body is balanced and straight, and just letting the arms rest comfortably. And if you're happy to, just letting the eyes close. Not because we're trying to tune out, but because we're particularly going to use the sense of touch to help tune our attention in. So just starting off with an awareness of the body now, just noticing how it's feeling. Anybody like to say what you found, what you noticed?
It's a bit of a relief.
Bit of a relief?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Just quiet and spacious. Yeah, it feels a bit less depressed.
In modern sort of life, we don't tend to give ourselves much space, do we? Yeah. Yes?
I found it helps to, I suppose, one, be directed by you, and two, be with other people who are doing it as well, as opposed to when I meditate on my own and I end up thinking about and watching and boyfriend.
Yeah. And I think not only in this room tonight, but also the Mindful in May, that the fact that you'll be practicing and remembering and working with a group of like-minded people makes it a whole lot easier.
Craig has actually written a number of books, and so you can have a look for them as well. Really interesting. So thank you, and thank you, Jessamy, for your wonderful drawings, which were